Let's hone in on one of those headline stories now. A disciplinary process for Northwest Premier Job Mokgoro and 4 other members of the provincial legislature begins later today. Now, they were suspended on Friday for allegedly defying the party's mandate by voting for a Democratic Alliance MPL for the position of chair of chairs. Mokgoro has denied the charge and expressed shock at the attack against him. The ANC in the province has been under an interim provincial committee for some time now after the provincial task team led by Mokgoro was disbanded. For an idea of what to make of this, let's bring in political analyst Kagiso Pooe. He says the ANC needs to rebuild its branches in the Northwest from scratch. Kagiso's live to us from Johannesburg this morning. Kagiso, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for making time. For people who aren't following the politics of the Northwest closely, what do we make of even just reports that Mokgoro's ouster is actually at the behest of former Premier Supra Mahumapelo, who also left that position under a cloud of controversy?
Morning, and thanks for having me. Well, as you said, this is not new to the Northwest Province. In fact, if we had to look at a historical overview of it, this is quite normal, as in what happens to the Northwest Province. One of the interesting things about it is they've never had a premier sit more than 2 terms. If anything, most premiers actually get suspended. This goes back to how the Northwest Province and the ANC was structured. It's the regional factions. It's actually regional factions more than your usual factions. By that, I mean, the Northwest can be historically has been split into 3 fractions. There's the ones in the northern Northwest Province, your Mahi gang, the ones in your central Northwest, which is your Ventersdorp, and the others closer to Gauteng. They've never actually got along, and this is just how they usually do politics. The weakness, as you've highlighted with the ANC, is that they've never really taken the time. This includes former President Nelson Mandela and Mbeki, to actually say, listen, let's actually start from scratch and get this province correctly situated to actually ensure that we audit branches, we audit who we know is and is not an ANC member. In the interim of this happening, you get people like Mr. Supra Mahumapelo who've been able to amass a lot of political power. And this political power is just simply playing out. And the person who was standing in, I don't know if you call him former or current premier, Mr. Job Mokgoro, he's just one of those casualties of this normal Northwest soap opera.
Yeah, and you know, in the latest episode of the soap opera, as you put it, is the election of the chair of chairs. Why was this used as a weapon, if you like, in the factionalism? How did we get here?
Well, look, they were always going to find a pretext. We also have to remember the big thing we have to keep in mind is the upcoming local government elections. And this is just part of the game which is leading up to it to ensure that whoever side is able to basically stack up their preferred candidates as they go towards the local election. So for me, the issue of using this chair of chairs is just simply a pretext for wanting to get the game underway to ensure that whoever ends up in charge of the province, by that I mean whichever faction ends up, is able simply to ensure that the current guard is basically ousted. So we shouldn't pay too much attention to the issue of they use the pretext of this chair of chairs. This was going to happen in either way going forward, that they were going to find a pretext to try and get rid of the current Premier Job Mokgoro.
What also raises suspicions is, if I can stay on just this moment, is the fact that, you know, Job Mokgoro is being accused of voting with the opposition, but my understanding is that that was a secret vote to begin with. So on what basis is this faction supposedly making this allegation?
I think that's what we'd all like to know. I know that there are those that believe in, let's just say, different types of beliefs that allow you to have insight into what people are thinking. But I doubt that that works in the political context. And that is, for me, the bigger question is, how do you justify? Because even his suspension, by normal ANC protocols, you simply don't use an SMS or a WhatsApp to suspend someone. In fact, you need to actually give them, it's almost like a charge sheet to say, this is why we're suspending you, and actually give them the right and the ability to defend themselves. So I think we're going to be able to find out how do they know how the premier, an individual, voted in a secret ballot. The only way I believe you could actually know that is if you use some higher power or some technological forces to actually ascertain correctly that this person voted against the mandate of the party.
Yeah, what was equally startling is the Northwest Premier appearing on various platforms to say, you know, I turned on my TV and that's when I found out that I was suspended. I mean, Kagiso, that's embarrassing.
Look, it's part and parcel of the degeneration of the ANC. As I
Yeah.
said, the Northwest Province can actually be taken as part and parcel of how you measure the ANC. You know, coming into 1994, there was always this mythology that this was an efficient, very effective party and how it dealt with things. But as we've seen over the years, it's just basically unraveling, and it's a fight for all to get positions. And the sad thing, especially in a province like the Northwest, is that it's always going to be the citizens that are left out. If you read the Auditor General's reports last year, this is a province that has dismally, I mean, over the last 2 decades, dismally failed. If you look at the socioeconomic indicators, it's one of the poorest provinces in the country. So while the big cats are fighting, and really it's a fight just for resources, nothing else, there's no principle in this fight. You know, it's the citizens of that province that are going to suffer. One only needs to look at certain areas, Mahikeng, where sometimes there's no water. If you look at the issues of just basic rollouts, it's the poor citizens of the province that always suffer for basically ineptitude when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point that should be driven home, right? What's that saying? When the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers the most. But depending on who you ask about what's going on in the Northwest, some people are bringing up Obed Bapela as the person who might be in line to replace Job Mokgoro if, in fact, his suspension does lead to his ouster eventually. What do we know about Obed Bapela's role in this saga, especially in the Northwest?
Well, we know that he was sent by a national government to try to clear out the problem. And again, this now basically is a repetition of what's happened since 1994. Because if you remember who President Thabo Mbeki and even President Nelson Mandela sent, they sent people who are considered outsiders from the province. And this just basically continued the factional war. So in sending him in, they're not basically fixing the problem. As I said, as you said in the beginning, my thing is that they just basically need to start from scratch. There is no ANC in the Northwest Province. There's basically factions. And until they basically start from scratch, allow local leadership to rise to the top, they're going to try to put in whoever they want. It can be Obed Bapela today, tomorrow it can be Gwede Mantashe. It really doesn't matter. But the key thing is you cannot basically bring in stability when there's non-functionality within the ANC firstly, and also the Northwest Province government as a whole.
It's a point you've made several times in our engagement. What do you mean by starting from scratch? What does that actually entail on a practical level?
There's what I'd like to see, and then there's what you say practically. Basically, you basically have to suspend all branches. If you read the previous conference of the ANC, this was a point made in the actual Secretary General's report that there's issues where they cannot even themselves authenticate who is and who isn't a proper branch within certain provinces. So basically, if that is the starting point, you need to suspend and do an audit from the beginning. And audits are quite simple. You just need to find out who's paid their dues. You ask all the secretary generals, or basically secretaries of branches and regions, to send their papers through, and you actually audit to say who actually exists as an ANC member, who's got their membership paid up, how long have they been a member. So it's something which should not take you longer than 6 months to do. But I doubt this is going to happen because the ANC always seems to be going from election to election. So that's what I simply mean by you start from fresh. You audit, you get rid of people who are not ANC members, and then you simply you start new elections, starting from the branch, the region, the province as a whole.
Kagiso Pooe, always great getting your insights on these issues. Thanks very much for coming onto the program. Kagiso Pooe is a senior lecturer at the Wits School of Governance. Kagiso, thanks very much indeed.